The spring of 1938 finds the 57-year-old chief of the General Staff hunched over a stack of classified documents. Ludwig Beck sits in his Berlin office, sorting through military intelligence reports. He repeatedly dips his pen into the inkwell, and the sharp scratching sound breaks the silence of the isolated room. He writes detailed warnings directed against the decisions of his own commander-in-chief. Outside his heavy door, the corridors of the military headquarters echo with the clinking of poured champagne glasses. The state apparatus is celebrating a bloodless triumph. They are toasting to the recent annexation of their southern neighbor. German columns recently crossed the border, taking control of the 6,700,000 citizens of Austria without firing a single rifle shot. While the rest of the high command stands in the brightly lit hallways polishing their freshly awarded medals, his brass desk lamp burns past midnight. He does not share their mood, because the intelligence folders on his desk reveal the genuine cost of the next operation. The political leadership is already drafting the tactical blueprints for an immediate military invasion of Czechoslovakia. This calculated political move represents a strategic error. It will drag the unprepared army into a two-front war. Beck writes memo after detailed memo, attempting to explain the cold logistical reality to a leadership driven by sudden territorial expansion. He delivers the extensive warnings directly to his commanding officers, only to watch them disappear into the bureaucratic void. The military structure will not halt the march toward an unwinnable conflict. The Chief of the General Staff signs his final official document and formally submits his resignation. The Chief of the General Staff planned a strike. The top commander of the Wehrmacht wanted a mutiny against war. Memorandums stacked high, yet the army prepared to march on the Sudetenland. 1938. Hitler targets Czechoslovakia for invasion. He demands Bohemia. He dares Britain and France to intervene. Beck calculates the odds. He checks the logistics. The math fails. The German army possesses just over 40 active divisions. 40 divisions. The French army alone can mobilize over 100 divisions. It is a severe mathematical deficit. A multi-front war means total collapse. Beck drafts a radical plan, an unprecedented collective démarche, the entire senior command refusing orders, a unified strike of generals. He believes the military cannot function without them. Hitler cannot execute the entire high command at once. Beck gathers his colleagues. He presents the intelligence. He spreads out the operational maps. He points to the vulnerable flanks. The lines show certain defeat. Beck waits for a response. The room stays quiet. Nobody speaks a word. Men clear their throats. Senior generals look away. They choose their promotions. They protect their comfortable ranks. Fear wins over strategic calculations. The unified front crumbles instantly. The meeting dissolves. Chairs scrape against the floorboards. The sharp rustle of folding paper maps breaks the silence. Beck sweeps the documents into a pile. He rolls them up. 4 years later, open resistance meant the firing squad. But even in 1938, defying the Führer was already a death sentence. Beck stood alone. On the 18th of August, 1938, a senior officer resigned for political reasons. Ludwig Beck placed his papers on the desk. Hitler accepted the departure. He buried the news. The German public knew nothing about their top general leaving. Beck stepped away from public life. But he did not go quiet. He maintained contact with a shadow network of diplomats and officers, quietly building an opposition while the government celebrated. They watched the continent. In September 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland. Victories piled up across France and the Balkans. The doubters stayed silent. Beck ignored the headlines and watched the maps. Then came June 1941. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. The front line stretched for 2,900 kilometers, forcing the command to supply divisions across frozen and hostile terrain. Beck had warned his peers about this exact trap. The strategic picture darkened. Every prediction Beck made materialized on the battlefield. By February 1943, the 6th Army surrendered at Stalingrad. The eastern advance halted in the freezing rubble. The total count of lost soldiers stood at 300,000. A future resistance leader welcomed Hitler in January 1933. Why? Army restoration. The paradox remains deeply bitter. Beck built the exact army currently grinding divisions at Stalingrad. He ignored Nazi racial ideology, but he openly supported military revival. Beck was a committed German nationalist. He craved an armed nation. He wanted power. In 1933, he took command of the Truppenamt. This shadow agency hid the banned command network. He operated in total secrecy. Officers wore civilian clothes. He systematically rebuilt the military brain from the inside. State budgets exploded. Annual military spending jumped. It grew from 0.7 to 4 billion Reichsmarks. This happened between 1933 and 1935. Draft numbers surged. Barracks smelled of fresh wool. Thousands of new uniforms arrived daily. Factories ran day and night. The draft doubled overnight. The covert phase ended in 1935. Hitler openly tore up the Versailles restrictions. The transition was purely bureaucratic. Signs came down. Workers removed the old Truppenamt plates from office doors. They hung new polished brass markers. Official appointments followed within hours. Clerks typed new letterheads. Beck personally signed the updated organizational orders. In July 1935, the government openly recreated the General Staff, and Ludwig Beck officially received the appointment as its very first chief. 100,000 men. Such was the limit set by the Treaty of Versailles for the German armed forces. The craving for a strong hand and massive conscription originated back in November 1918. Military leaders experienced the peace agreement as a deep physical humiliation. Germany lost its conscription model and its formal general staff, becoming a paper army restricted by foreign observers. Meanwhile, the French military maintained over 500,000 active troops right across the border. This contrast pushed the German officer corps toward radical political choices. Ludwig Beck stayed in uniform during the Weimar years to rebuild the military foundation. He shifted his focus from battlefield command to analytical work, reading history to formulate new tactical concepts. The trauma of forced disarmament turned him into a meticulous military intellectual. In 1931, Beck published the official German Army Operations Manual on mobile warfare. Industrialist son Ludwig August Theodor Beck moved between military academies, Strasbourg, Nice. Imperial institutions forged this military logic over decades. His life began on June 29, 1880. Biebrich, a quiet riverside town on the Rhine. His father owned factories. He demanded rigid daily discipline. A spoken word held true value. The young boy observed everything. He stayed silent. Other cadets played rough field games. He read history books in the corner. Duty always outweighed basic human emotion. This formed the old Prussian mindset. 1898, the Imperial German Army enlisted him. 15 years of border postings followed. Infantry regiments along the French frontier, field maneuvers in the rain, staff schools. He studied troop deployments. He mapped supply lines. He avoided cheap public glory. He sought pure tactical knowledge. 1912, the sudden call came. Berlin, the General Staff headquarters. He entered the Corps command structure. Europe possessed no greater army. Then, August 1914 arrived. The entire continent caught fire. Beck directed Western Front logistics. He calculated railway capacities. Trenches stretched for 400 miles. Damp mud swallowed heavy leather boots. Yellow mustard gas burned the lungs. Chemical weapons escalated at Ypres in 1917. Men drowned in flooded craters. 4 slow years passed. Heavy artillery shattered the earth. Nearly 2 million German soldiers died. The empire exhausted its reserves. Germany surrendered. The heavy door of the Berlin apartment clicked shut, leaving only his young daughter to greet the returning officer. His wife Amelie had perished in the freezing temperatures of 1917. Behind the rigorous facade of the staff analyst remained a profound personal void. During that infamous turnip winter, life expectancy across the empire plummeted sharply as catastrophic civilian food shortages devastated the home front. He raised their child entirely alone while quietly navigating the demanding ranks of the general staff. A stark visual contrast defined his private evening hours. The crisp general's uniform hung motionless on its wooden hanger, while the sound of classical music drifted through the otherwise empty rooms. He spent countless solitary nights immersed in dense philosophy volumes and cups of bitter coffee. He never sought another marriage, pouring his entire existence into the operational structure of the army. Without a sprawling family to protect, the commander harbored an unusual immunity to standard political blackmail. The widower secured his position as a high-ranking officer who acknowledged the German state as his sole remaining companion. 1242. British explosives detonated under a map table in East Prussia. On the 20th of July, 1944, the solitary general became the shadow head of a provisional government. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg arrived at the Wolfschanze complex near Rastenburg. The military site covered 250 hectares. 50 massive concrete bunkers stood hidden under camouflage nets in the thick forest. Stauffenberg walked into the wooden briefing hut carrying a leather briefcase. He pushed the case deep under the heavy conference table. He placed it just 2 meters away from the target. Then, he excused himself to take a call. He walked out the door. The timer ran out. The blast tore through the wooden briefing room. Beams splintered. Glass shattered across the inner security compound. Officers flew across the floor. 4 people died from the crushing impact and severe burns. But the entire coup failed on a simple physical technicality. A heavy oak table leg redirected the explosive wave. This solid wood support stood directly between the bomb and the dictator. It absorbed the shrapnel. It took the heat. Adolf Hitler walked out of the thick smoke. His black trousers burned. His eardrums burst from the pressure. A falling beam bruised his arm, but he remained standing. 600 kilometers away, the resistance mobilized. Beck assumed his new role as the shadow leader. The general issued immediate commands to regular army units. Rebel officers seized checkpoints across the capital. Telegraph operators transmitted Operation Valkyrie orders. Internal military channels broadcasted the death of the dictator to garrisons across the Reich. The conspirators waited in the Bendler Block headquarters on the Bendlerstrasse. The takeover seemed successful. Then, a sharp metallic telephone ring cut through the tense silence of the command center. An operator lifted the black receiver. Adolf Hitler called the Bendler Block directly. Who did General Friedrich Fromm arrest first when Hitler survived? His own accomplices. The dictator's call sparked a chain reaction of self-preservation among the conspirators. The coup collapsed within minutes. Panic replaced organized military strategy. Fromm detained his former allies. Survival dictated a rapid, bloody purge. Beck knew the grim alternative. The Gestapo interrogation cells waited. Judge Roland Freisler waited. Freisler screamed at tied defendants. He turned them into wrecks. He sentenced them to hang. Strangulation by thin piano wire. Executions filmed for private entertainment. Hitler watched the dark footage. Beck wanted a different exit. He asked for his pistol. Fromm granted the final request. The massive Bendler Block stood quiet. Erected in 1914. Built for the Imperial Navy. Designed for global war planning. Now a makeshift execution chamber. For the Wehrmacht High Command. July 21, 1944. Shortly after midnight. Beck grasped the heavy gun. The metallic slide clacked loudly. The noise cut the silence. He raised the steel weapon. He pressed the cold barrel, right against his own temple. His aging hand trembled. He pulled the stiff trigger. A spark flashed in darkness. The single shot rang out. He survived. A massive head wound opened. Thick blood poured over wood. Beck lay on the floor. He kept steadily breathing, barely conscious. The bullet failed. Fromm issued a direct order. A sergeant stepped right forward. He aimed at the neck. One shot fired. The general tried saving Germany. He never fell in combat. He never faced the enemy. He bled out on his office floor. The former chief of the general staff met his violent end at exactly 64. In 1944, the SS scattered his ashes over raw sewage. Today, a military academy in Sonthofen bears his name. A bullet to the head was not enough for the state. Fear drove the regime to physically erase the dead. At first, Beck's body was buried quietly without honors in the old St. Matthew Cemetery in Berlin-Schöneberg. Relatives and close allies hoped to secure a final resting place. But the Gestapo quickly returned to the gravesite. Soldiers dug up the freshly covered coffin under the cover of darkness. They dragged the corpse across the city to a municipal crematorium in the working-class wedding district. The ovens burned the physical evidence of the conspiracy. The government ordered a complete purge of his memory. They transported the ashes directly to the Rieselfelder. These Berlin sewage fields covered over 10,000 hectares outside the city limits. For decades, since the 19th century, this vast network absorbed the raw wastewater of millions of capital residents. The SS dumped the remains of the former chief of the General Staff directly into the fetid sludge. The ashes sank into the dark soil. It was a deliberate act of posthumous humiliation. The dictator wanted no headstone, no pilgrimage site, no memory. The state wanted the general scrubbed from the national geography. But history resisted the frantic purge. The West German government eventually reclaimed his legacy to build a new identity. The post-war military in 1955 needed officers who had chosen principle over blind obedience. 12 years after the execution, the Bundeswehr recognized the man who saw the abyss. The military academy in Bavaria bears his name today.